My name is Peggy Ward, and I'm a CPA by trade. I grew up in Colorado, but my parents were originally from Kansas. So we ended up in Kansas. That's where I went to high school. So that's mainly where I've spent the majority of my adult life. But in 2021, I moved to Florida. So now I'm from Florida. Most of my running career, most of my races, I was in Kansas. So how I started running, well, it's kind of a weird story. When I was in high school, I didn't feel like our volleyball coach ran us enough for basketball. So after volleyball, I would go home and get a run in. And I'll never forget one time the volleyball coach saw me running down the street and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm trying to get in shape for basketball." So I don't know. I think that's originally why I started running outside of any kind of organized someone making me do it, because I was in volleyball, basketball, and track in high school, but I was never really super good at anything like that. So I'm a bit klutzy. So that's kind of how I started running. Basically, I didn't really start doing any races outside of, like I said, outside of like school sports until later in life. Because by then, you go through college and get your first job, you're working, but I kept running. But I just didn't think races were that important, or I wasn't signing up for them. So then eventually I ended up signing up for a 5K, which is where most people start, right? So I did a couple of those. Then I decided, well, I want to do a marathon, but I did a half marathon and a marathon, so like a month apart. And then I decided, okay, well, I'll do another marathon. But when I did that second marathon, I kind of felt like I was living the same dream. Does that make sense? Or having the same goal?
Yes.
So I started to wonder, is there anything longer? Is there anything that you can do that's more than the marathon? And so, well, the first marathon I placed second in my age group. So I thought, okay, maybe I could keep doing that. But like I said, then the second one, it was just kind of the same. So I started doing some research and I found that there was a 50-mile race and it was only about 90 miles from my house. So I thought, okay, let's think about this. Back then, so this is like 2005. So the internet and things, they aren't that it's not as robust when you're trying to think about ultras, and ultras weren't as popular back then.
Yep.
So the funny part of the story is I went online in 2020, no, yeah, 20, when did I do that? 2005. I went online and I found this training plan and I bought a treadmill knowing that my daughter was at an age where I'd probably be doing a lot of this after she had gone to bed, so kind of in my basement kind of thing. Well, come to find out, I had actually pulled a training plan for a 100-miler, not a 50-miler. So the day of the race, I show up and set a course record for women.
That's awesome.
So then I'm like, okay, maybe I know how to do this. And I decided to kind of think about it and decided, well, maybe I'll try for a 100-miler. Well, as you know, that's a whole nother level. It's a whole nother level of training. Even though I trained for a 100-miler, it's just, there's a lot more to think about if you're going to do 100 miles. So by the time I was ready for my first 100-miler, I started running it, but again, I'm still in competitive Peggy mode, right? So I'm running it thinking, I think I want to win. And about mile 28, I made a mistake. I ran through some rocks and I didn't realize I had stress fractured my foot because I was putting up with some Martin's neuroma then. So then when I saw my crew at mile 36, I'm like, you guys, I need some Tylenol, some ibuprofen, something. My foot really hurts. By mile 46, I could not run anymore. My foot hurt so bad, and we found out I had stress fractured it. So that kind of put me on the sidelines for a bit. But I didn't give up on the 100-mile dream. So then 2012 comes around, and I decide I'm going to run again, a 100-miler, and this was going to be the Heartland 100, so it was the Heartland 50 that I had set the course record for women in. So it was the same course, but a 100-mile version. So it was, 25 more miles out and back. Anyway, so by the time it was time to be about 2 weeks out, I had really bad plantar fasciitis. And I thought, I don't think I can take this much pain for 100 miles. So I called the race director, and the race director at the time was Tony Clark. And I said, hey, I can't do this. So I'll just have to drop. And so then I did, and so that was supposed to be October. Well, by about November, it had all kind of cleared up. So I picked a December race. Well, there wasn't a lot of 100-milers, in December, but there was one called the Bartram's 100 in Georgia. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm from Kansas at the time, so I flew there by myself. I'm going to crew myself. I got a Jeep so I could crew myself and it would be very efficient. So I'm going along and it's in a forest, and about the 100K mark, they tell me, you're the number one female. Do you want a pacer? We know you're by yourself. Okay, I was like, no, I don't think I want to be competitive in this race because I just wanted the buckle at that point. I didn't want to do something stupid again and stress fracture or do something that would not let me have the buckle. So they were like, okay. And so I ended up getting second place female in that race. So I'm still pretty happy with that. And I thought I was going to be done. I thought, okay, I just got my 100 miler in. I'm finished. Well, then the next year, Tony Clark, he's going to be part of this story several times. That's why I mentioned his name. He calls me and
Yep.
he's like, are you going to race? This is 2013, the Heartland 100. And I said, well, I didn't plan to. And he said, well, we deferred you to this year. And I thought, well, if I paid for it, I guess, if I already paid for it, I guess I'll run it, right? So I ran it, and that's actually where I've got my PR. That's where I have my personal record for the 100 there. So that was
Nice.
fun. So that's 2013 by then. 2014, I was pacing and helping other people. And then in 2014, they came up with this Grand Slam, the Kansas Grand Slam. So it was going to be 4 100 milers. You start in March, you end in October, and they're 4 different 100 milers. And there were two guys who did that, and they were two guys that I really look up to and who have been ultra mentors to me ever since. Iron Will, I don't know if everybody's heard of him, William Sprouse, and then Eldon. And Eldon is now the race director for Heartland. And so I watched them do that, and they ran a race in July. And I remember I was sitting at the swimming pool with my friend during that race, and we were like, can you believe somebody's actually running in this heat? Like, this is ridiculous. Because Kansas is very hot. It gets over 100 degrees, and it's very humid. So, I watched them achieve that Grand Slam in 2014, and I thought, you know what? Maybe a woman needs to do that. So in 2015, I signed up and I did it. And I even threw in another 40 miler in May. So that was really fun. And then
So wait, when the guys had done this, were there just very few women that had signed up, or no women had done it? It was just
no women had signed up. So then the next year, there were 7 of us that started to try to get the Grand Slam, and 3 of us finished. And it was Will and Eldon had to not finish because there was a wedding. How dare someone schedule a wedding on a race day that he had to go to? And then another gal, Crystal Thalke, and I were the 3 that finished the slam that year. So I think I'm still the one who finished it as the oldest female finisher at the time. So maybe that's my claim to fame there. I don't know. So that was fun. And then if you look at my races, though, I kind of start running my own races or pacing and crewing other people. I do a mix of both. Plus, then I also like to volunteer at races, especially if I've run the race, because I feel like we have to be individually prepared, but none of us do this on our own. It's a whole community. So I try to give back to other runners, especially runners that have helped me. But even if they haven't helped me, I want to help them because people, before I could help them, helped me, kind of a thing. I know that's kind of a weird way of saying it, but and then I like to give back to the races because, again, I know it takes a lot of volunteers to put a race on. So I like to do that. So then in 2015, thinking, hey, I was this Kansas Grand Slam runner, right? So I got the courage to apply for the Badwater 135 and hoped to get in 2016. And a lot of that was driven by Tony Clark at the time because he had done Badwater 3 times. So he was kind of like one of my ultra mentors. And so I watched him and I thought, okay, I'm going to try for that because that seems like my dream race. That became my dream race. Well, I didn't get in 2016, so I was a little bit sad, right? Because I'm like, I did 4 100s and a 40. Like, what else does it take? Well, when you read the instructions on how to apply, it takes a lot.
Yeah.
So again, then 2016, I'm not really doing a lot of my own. I'm just helping other people. So by 2019, I told one of my friends who had ran Badwater Salton Sea, I said, hey, I think I want to run Badwater Salton Sea. I want to get the Badwater experience. And that's kind of like a little mini Badwater 135. I'm going to try that. And I call William, Iron Will. This is a funny story. So I decided I wanted to do that. And so I call him and I'm getting ready to go get my hair cut. So it's like after work, I'm going to go get a haircut, but I call him, I talk to him and I was like, think about it and maybe we could be a team. By the time I get home from getting my haircut, he's already signed up. So we went from think about it to, I guess we're doing this now.
It's a slippery slope.
I know. It's that enabler. We talk about people who are our enablers. So that's what happened. So him and I went out and we ran the Badwater Salton Sea, had a great time. And then, so I kind of figured that was going to be my Badwater experience, but I kept thinking, so this is 2019, I kept thinking, I really want to do the Badwater 135. So again, I read the application and everything, and I had done some other 100s. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to apply. And I applied and I thought, okay, if I'm going to apply, I'm going to go big. Like, I'm going to do it all. So I applied to do the Ultra Cup. I applied to raise money for the Challenged Athlete Foundation because I wanted it to be about something other than me. I wanted it to just have more meaning than just me running my dream race. And I've got some people in my family that, they've had battles and they can't walk right, or they had to struggle to walk again. And I thought that would be a great way to make a difference too.
Yeah.
So I got in, and all my Ultra Cup dreams were coming true. But again, it was 2020. So the 2020 race, so it was supposed to be Cape Fear, and then followed by Salton Sea, then the Badwater 135. Well, first Cape Fear gets canceled because of COVID. And Salton Sea gets canceled because of COVID. So then 10 days before the 135, it gets canceled because of COVID. And I get goosebumps. I'll never forget that feeling of finding that out. I had just bought our team shirts and everything, and, trained. And I remember I had a 2-story house then. So I sat down on my stairs and I was in disbelief. I'll be honest, I cried, trying to figure this out. So then Chris had told us, that the race director for the Badwater 135, that he would prefer that we get a 100 miler in. So luckily a week later than the Badwater 135 was one of the 100 milers that I had run for the Grand Slam. And it's hot, it's July, it's Kansas. And I thought, that's perfect, I'm ready to go, we'll run it. And it was really nice because 3 people on my Badwater 135 crew agreed to crew me on that, so that we could kind of have a little trial run too. So, that kind of worked out. And so Tony Clark was going to be my crew chief for the 135. So he showed up and everything. So it was all great. And honestly, I brought a little something. So it's a little bracelet, and it was made by
cute.
Star Blackford. And I want to show it to everybody because she wrote when she made it, because I had her make it for me. And she said, what color do you want? And I said, you choose the colors, artist choice. And so it's the Badwater 135 bracelet, and she was making these for Badwater Ben so that we could raise money for him. And so one of the colors that she chose was cinnamon. And here's why she chose cinnamon. Because it's bitter on its own, representing 2020, but brings out so much flavor out of others when added. And I told her that's perfect, because when I looked back on 2020 and what happened with us not getting to run, there was so much bitterness at first, but then so much sweetness came out of it. Like one of the other runners that I met, so in 2020, gyms were closed. And so we were all talking to each other on Facebook. We really became a kind of a bonded group. Well, I met Don Lisenby that way. So I'm in Kansas, she's in Florida. We've never seen each other. When Chris, the race director, was trying to make COVID-19 concessions for the race, he took it down to 10 people starting at once. So it was Don Lisenby, her and I were going to be the only 2 females in that starting time. And so we kind of started talking to each other. Come to find out, she's a coach. And so after 2020, I'd never had a coach before. But when I started getting ready for 2021, I decided maybe I should get a coach. Maybe that's what I'm really going to need to take it to the next level. Because when I was running the 100 miler in 2020, I saw some mistakes I had made in my training. So I hired Dawn. She became my coach. I joined. One of the things I didn't have time to do in 2020 was join HotWorks, which is a gym where you work out in saunas. So for 2021, I joined HotWorks, and so I was actually a member of 3 gyms. So sometimes I would go to all 3 before work started, but I would row in 130 degrees at HotWorks up to an hour at a time, or I would sit in the sauna. I mean, I was able to train so much more and so much better, and having a coach that I actually finished in the top 10 female when I did the Badwater 135, and I never struggled. I never had food issues because I had all the right people on my team to help me figure it out. Tony Clark was there with me. He was my crew chief. He had been there 3 times. He knew what I needed to do to stay cool, to keep sweat on me, to keep hydrated. I never was once sick to my stomach or anything. You get tired.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you get tired, but no, I didn't have any problems at all. So
Had Dawn done the 135 prior?
she had done the 142. So that's where they
Got
go
it.
all the way up to the top of Mount Whitney.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so all the 2020 runners could have either run 2021 or 2022. So I ran 21 and I was crewing someone else in 22, which was kind of fun because then I got to see Dawn and we got to meet each other and everything. She ended up getting COVID. And so
Oh,
during the race, she was trying to run with COVID. So it's kind of, again, one of those goosebump moments where I got to be there when she was so sick that she couldn't continue. And I felt blessed to get to be there to help her through that understanding, and we've
mm,
bonded so much since. And she becomes part of my story later too. So now we've really had a chance to get to know each other a lot better, and I don't have a coach anymore. After that, after Badwater, so the timing of it all, Badwater was in 2021. December of 2021 was when I moved to Florida. So,
mm,
and I'm a CFO of a company, a holding company, and we've got 4 other companies, so it's quite busy.
mm,
And so I really didn't even try to race in 2022. But then January of 2023, I did the long haul 100. It's not too far from my
mm.
house. And it was kind of fun because the 2 guys who were my partners in the Badwater Salton Sea, the 2 times I ran it, came. And then a gal who I was supposed to be a partner with in Badwater Salton Sea that year, 2023, came. So it was like all 4 of us. And we were just kind of not running together, but, sharing the race. It was a really amazing experience.
That's
But
cool.
the kicker on that was about mile 83. I remember it. It wasn't about, it was. So at mile 83, I got the worst cramp of my life in my calf. And since this is a running podcast, I can tell you, I was in the porta potty and I got the cramp so bad, I didn't know if I was going to be able to stand up. And I didn't know how I was going to be able to take the big step out of there. It hurt so bad. I wasn't too far from my stuff because you know what a runner wants to do? They want to go drink pickle juice. They want to go get some broth. We want to do all the things we think we know how to do. So I went and did all
Yep.
that and it still hurt. It's mile 83. You're not quitting, right? You're not
Yeah.
quitting.
Yeah.
So I decided I can walk it off. I'll go to the next aid station and drink some of their broth, right? So I did that and I kept trying to run a little bit and it kept hurting. I couldn't get rid of that cramp. Well, then a weird sensation on my way back started where I felt like my sock was going inside my shoe. It wasn't.
Oh, I hate that.
It was it was just my nerves thinking the sock was going down. But again, I was not going to quit. So, but it was a 10-mile loops. So at mile 90, I'm back at my stuff. And one of my crew members is a Santa blanket, sounds really silly, but it's a Santa blanket that goes to every race with us. And so I wrapped my Santa blanket around me and I thought, this is going to be slow going, but I have plenty of time. I can just walk the last 10 miles. If I have time, I'm going to get that buckle.
Yep.
So I ended up walking the last 10 miles to get the buckle. And oddly, I was the first place female in my age group because I had been doing so well before I got that cramp. Well,
That's awesome.
so the gal who had come from North Carolina, who was going to be my Salton Sea partner that year, she was staying with me and I had driven us there. And this is my right leg. And it is so swollen. Like, I don't even know if it's kind of weird. It was in Florida, but we had freezing fog that night. So we have on
Mm.
leggings and stuff. We're not wearing shorts. So I didn't know if my leggings were even going to be able to expand enough as much as my leg kept swelling. And I kept telling her, I'm tired. Like, I didn't even want to put my gear on the trailer to go back to our car, but I knew I needed to. So I did. And I drove us back. We stopped at Starbucks and my speech was being slurred. And we're laughing because we don't know what's going on. So this is Sunday morning. So then by the time we start looking at my leg, it is all red and swollen. Well, whatever. So, we're ultra runners. We just keep going. And I couldn't hardly sleep that night either. So then late Monday morning, I'm at work and I decide I'm going to make a doctor appointment and go see what's going on with this leg because it's really weird. It's so big. Well, they sent me immediately to the emergency room. They immediately put me in the hospital. So I had cellulitis. The cellulitis led to rhabdo because that muscle broke down. And then all of that led to sepsis. So I had all 3 of
Oh
those.
my
And I'm
God.
still like running around.
Oh my goodness.
So my joke is the Florida forest was trying to kill me. Okay.
I mean, it certainly sounds like it.
Dawn was there for that because she had a lot of athletes there, so she was there for us, and she was there when I
Yep.
finished and everything. But one of the things about Dawn is she was there for me every day in the hospital. She called me, she was checking up on me, she was trying to help me figure out how this happened because I was like, what did I do wrong? I was hydrated, everything was right. She said, basically once you get the cellulitis and you get the swelling, there's nothing you can do. So
Mm.
So honestly, with all of that, so that's January of 23, my kidneys took a really bad hit. So
Hmm.
even after I could run again, which was several months, it was really hard for me to stay hydrated, and my kidney health wasn't cleared for about a year and a half.
Hmm.
So then with
How long did
that,
you have to stay in the hospital? How long were you
three
hospitalized for?
days, 3 days.
3? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and they, kind of attribute to us runners, though. They said any one of those three things can kill you. And if our hearts weren't
100%.
as strong as they were, we would have had a different story. So, I mean,
Yeah.
kudos to us runners that we take care of ourselves and our body vital organs can rebound from that kind of stuff. So,
Hmm.
although I guess we wouldn't get it if we weren't out there running like crazies, but oh well. It's what we
It's a
like to
catch
do.
20.
Yeah. Okay, so then here I am in recovery mode, right? And like I said, Don's beside me all the way, but I really am not needing a coach because I'm not really figuring out a race. So then I finally decided I'm going to do a race. And so I picked what did I choose? Oh, the Daytona 100, that December
Hmm.
of 20, what would that have been? Five. Is that right? Yeah. December of 25.
Yeah, just last
No,
year.
December of 24. December of 24.
Yeah.
And so I'm running that and I start to have some of the same issues with my leg that I had. You're going to be susceptible to it. But I didn't tell my crew for about 15 miles. And then when I told them, I was like, we need to have a team meeting. And they were like, okay, what's going on? So I only ran about 53 miles of that because I thought, it's not worth life and death to get that buckle.
Yeah.
I really wanted that buckle, but it's not worth going back to the hospital and having them say you're lucky to be alive. So that was hard to
Yeah, there's only
pull.
so many times you can do that. You're not a cat with 9 lives.
Right, right. And I have a daughter who I think she kind of likes having a mom around, and I have a dog that kind of needs me too. So I think I'm needed. But so that
Yeah.
was kind of hard. And Dawn again was there with me all the way, kind of cheering me on. And so then Dawn is a race director actually. So I decided. Well, okay. So when I did the Ultra Cup, there was another gal who did the Ultra Cup, and so we call ourselves Ultra Cup sisters. Her name's Bethany, and so she picked this race, and it was one of Dawn's in August of last year. And it's a 12-hour race, and I've never done one like that where it's based on time. So we decided we'd go there, we'd just have fun, we'd just do it, it would be my comeback race. So we get there and we're having fun, and I'm not even really paying attention because I'm just kind of cruising, doing my thing. I'm just going to do what my body says to do. I got first place female. So
That's
now I'm thinking,
amazing.
okay, I need to do this more. So then they came out with this new race called the Festivus 100. And
Hmm.
so that was December of 25. And so December 6th. So I'm running and having a great race. Like everything's on target. I feel like my comeback is complete. Well, at mile 38.99 to be exact, I tell a guy I'm going to pass him. And I thought he heard me, but he had headphones in, and apparently he didn't hear me. So right as I got up next to him, he comes over to the left a little bit. So I go over to the left and twist like this because I don't want to hit him, right? About that time, I'm a klutz. I should not be running trail. About that time, there's something that decides to grab me. It must have been a tree root or something, and threw me down so hard. But it was weird because my hip barely hit. It was mostly my shoulder, and I hit the tree with my ribs on the way down. And my water bottles went into the sand. It was horrible. But the guy was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I get up and try to run again, and I'm like, something's wrong with my shoulder. I can't even hold my water bottle. So
Hmm.
I had to walk another mile to the next aid station, and I was still passing people. But I mean, I have a really fast walk. I'm so competitive. But when I got to the next aid station, I was just in so much pain. I knew I had to call it. And come to find out, I had slightly dislocated my shoulder, and then I had bruised ribs 2 and 3, and that's hard to
Hmm.
breathe. And like all of this was just so messed up.
Yep.
So I'm coming out of that now, and now I'm going to try to figure out a race.
You're like one of these ultra runners. You can't be killed, right? It's just that old cliche, like too tough to die, right? It's just you have all of these setbacks, and yet it doesn't deter you. You just keep pushing forward. It probably has a lot to do with how competitive you are and how much you just love running in and of itself. So, I mean, that's
Well, or maybe I'm
that's
too stupid
amazing.
to quit because
No.
the third race of the Ultra Cup, it was trail, and again, I am not a trail runner, and so Iron Will is in that one. And so I fell down twice and I caught up to him and I was like, hey, Will, I fell down twice already. He was like, we're too old to be falling down. I'm like, okay, I'll slow it down a little bit then. And it was so funny because I'm not athletic at all. Don't ask me how this happened, but I tripped. And in Kansas, people think it's flat, but it's not. I mean, especially this was around a lake. So my water bottle is in my left hand. I trip and I somehow, when I'm tripping, I'm grabbing this vine, this kind of like, I don't know, vine that's hooked to a bush of some sort. And I flip and I'm basically hanging down a ravine, basically, by my right hand. And I look around and I'm like, I either have to drop all the way down there, which looked pretty scary, or I have to like scrunch over to this tree, roll over, and come back up. And so that's what I did. But the bad thing about it was it jacked my back up. Like the last 25 miles, I could not stand up straight. I can't even do it to this day, but my hip bone and my rib bones were hitting each other. Like I was all bent over when I came to that finish line. And luckily I had pacers for that one because I kept saying, are we going to make it? Are we going to make it? You got to run a little bit. So I was actually running bent over like that. But I
Oh
made the
man.
deadline to finish by about half an hour, but still that was, but if it wouldn't have been the Grand Slam, if it wouldn't have been race three, I may have considered quitting, but not race three
Yep.
of the Grand Slam.
Well, I'm curious to know because it seems like you did the 50 and then you skipped right over to hundreds and then you've sort of stayed at that distance. What is it about the 100-mile distance that really speaks to you?
Well, see, I don't know because I don't know if it's the camaraderie that you get at the 100-mile distance. I don't know if it's the figuring yourself out. You learn a lot about yourself the last 50 miles of a race. But honestly, it's funny that you asked me that question because now I'm starting to ask myself, do I want to keep running 100s or do I want to go to the 50s? Because that 12-hour race was nothing but fun. You know, there was no questioning your life choices at 3 a.m. because you hear something howling and you wonder if you're about to be eaten alive.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm at a place right now where I don't know what my next ultra dream goal is going to be. I want to do a 200 miler. And I've already told that to some of my friends, and they know which one I have picked. And I was going to do it this year until I fell down in December. I think it'll be next year because, again, when I train, I want to train and come strong, and I
Hmm.
train very race specific. So it'll probably be next year when I do the 200. One of my favorite sayings is only those who are willing to go too far will ever know how far they can go. I want to know how
That's a
far.
good one.
I want to know how far I can go. So I think 200 is going to be my next challenge, but maybe I do 50 milers. I don't know. I'm
Okay,
trying to,
we can totally cut it out if you don't want to tell anybody, but I'm curious to know what 200-mile race you picked. Yeah, that's cool. So it'll be down there in Kansas.
yeah, I'll go back to Kansas for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's like, kind of like that's one of the troubles or the issues with race directing, right? Like it's not just as easy as throwing up a sign and saying, "Hey, come here today," especially at the 200-mile distance. There's a
Hmm.
lot of I think people are not totally apprised of how much goes on logistically to
Hmm.
get water where it needs to be and get people where they need to be for safety purposes. And I think that's why you see a lot of race directors who are going for 100 milers and 200 and so on and so forth, doing out and backs or looped courses
Hmm.
because it's just more logistically
Right,
feasible. It's definitely easier on infrastructure and volunteers and stuff like that. And I don't fault them for that, but I think there's definitely something to be said for a 200 or a 100 that's you're out there, you don't see the same section of trail twice, even
hmm,
though I know that's really challenging, but yeah,
right.
so
Well, and that was the 135. You started at one point and you ended at another.
right.
And if you've got the right crew, that's doable.
Hmm.
Even at
Hmm.
Salton Sea, there was one corner, and I don't know why in my brain I could just not get that corner in my brain. But I always ask my crew, please park at this corner because when you look at the road, it doesn't make sense that that's where you make a right hand turn. So I always had my
Hmm.
crew parked there with their blinker on, like, turn this way. Because sometimes when you're running, especially at night, things just look different. Things don't seem like they should.
100%. Yeah. That's one of the things that I'm always coaching my athletes on when they're trying to go for 100 milers, or if they're trying to do a time based race, like you talked about that 12-hour race. It's like, it's totally one thing to be running at varying levels of light during the day. It's a completely other to do it
Mhm.
at night. You have to get used to your headlamp or your waist lamp, and then you have to get used to only being able to see what your light touches, and you don't get to orient to what you were orienting, especially if it's a looped race. You don't get to have those same
Right.
visual cues, those same visual markers, and so you either really have to know the course, have your GPX file. It's a whole different ballgame, and some people think, well, it's a looped course. I'll totally be fine at night. I don't really have to practice it. And I'm always encouraging people, you don't have to practice a ton,
Mhm.
but you I would definitely recommend that you get out there as much as you
Right.
can at varying times, because it's not going to look the same, it's not going to feel the same.
Right. Well, and when we did the long haul 100, it's looped, but it's out and back. And I did the old course, so it was out, back, out, back, out, back 3 different times. And so that was easier because you were very seldom alone. There was very
Mm,
seldom a time when there wasn't somebody else so that you could tell yourself, I'm in the right place. I haven't made a wrong turn.
right.
But you're right, that first, so the third race of the Grand Slam was probably my first hard trail that I did. And you're right, I am so glad that I had crew and pacers, because the pacers could be helping me look for flags, because like you said, what you see during the day is different than what you see during the night. But when I was doing the Festivus 100 then this last December, I was trying to memorize things because we
Mm,
were on the pink trail. But what I realized is a lot of the pink markings on the trees, they were up 10 feet because the trees had grown. And like you said, your headlamp is not going to see that at night. And
yep.
then they got a horrible rainstorm, and the guy who was supposed to pace me, my crew member, he was like, I'm kind of glad we're not out there right now. And I was like, I know. It would have, because people couldn't see. That even
Yep.
with 2 or 3 headlamps, they couldn't see what they needed to see to stay on trail. So that's really
Yeah.
hard, and a lot of people who hear that we run these ultra distances, they think it's about the distance. It is about the distance, but there's so much more going on. Your brain is having to work, whether it's be because you're figuring out the trail, or even the Daytona 100. It was the constant cars, and you're going along these very busy roads. And so you can't just kind of zone out, because you're
Hmm.
always kind of watching the drivers to make sure they're not zoning out, kind of a thing. And then another thing that I realized I'm starting to get really sensitive to also is like the fumes, the diesel fumes or the gas fumes and stuff like that. So smelling that for a long period of time, it starts to wear on you too, because you're used to fresh air when you run.
Yeah. Yeah, for
So
sure. Well, you mentioned, a little bit about people thinking that it's just about the miles, right? A lot of the questions, some of the questions that I get about completing ultra distances have to do with confidence in your abilities, your own abilities. And I think for people who are going for either their first ultra or maybe their farthest ultra, there's a gap, obviously, in their skill level, their comfort level, their confidence. I'm totally putting you on the spot, but I think this is a question that you might be able to help people with. When you were going for your first 100 miler, or when you were doing Badwater, did you ever have a little bit of that gap where you were like, ooh, I don't know if I can do this, and I'm not, like, you had a little break in confidence?
okay, let me talk about my first one first, because I think that's going to be a different story altogether. So, again, I didn't know anybody who was doing it, and I didn't have anybody to know what to be afraid of. Luckily, I ran into I taught at a university for 20 years. So I ran into one of my former students when I was going to get my driver's license renewed the year before I did it. And I was like, hey, James, I'm going to go do this 50 miler. And he's like, you need crew, because he was a triathlete. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, let me crew you, because if you don't even know what I mean, I'm going to crew you. So I have another friend who was a baseball coach, and he was a pitching coach, and he used to do inspirational speaking, and he talked about little league mentality, about how when you're in little league, you don't know what to be afraid of, right? You just show up and you have fun. You're not all, ooh, this is the wrong bat, or the mound is too big or too small. You just show up and you have fun. So after I listened to his little recording of, his little league mentality thing, I thought that was me, my first ultra, because I had little league mentality. I didn't overthink everything because I didn't know what to overthink. In fact, you're going to laugh at me when I tell you this. The race started at 6 o'clock in the morning in October in Kansas in the middle of nowhere. It's really dark at 6 o'clock in the morning in the middle of nowhere in Kansas, and I didn't know to have a headlamp. So I showed up, and the first hour of the race, I literally had to keep up with other runners so that I could be using the light that they had to even know where the road was. That's how dark it was.
Yep.
But
Yep.
did I ever give up? Did I ever be like, this is stupid? No, you just go with it because you have little league mentality. You don't know to get in a bind about it.
Yeah.
So
That's hilarious. It's funny because like I actually know people who on the flip side of that particular story about the headlamp, I know people who try to shave weight by doing that. They'll show up to a race early and just piggyback off of somebody else and not take a headlamp because they're like, I don't need it. I'm only going to need it for the first hour. I'll just hook onto somebody's heels and follow them for the first hour. And so it's like full circle, right?
I was smart. Well, I think the one got caught on when she took a side trail, and I didn't realize her side trail was because she needed to use the restroom. So I'm still following her, and I'm like, "Oops, sorry." So
Too funny.
running. So then I had to start running by myself in the dark and just hope I didn't trip over something. So I feel like the first race was totally little league mentality.
Yeah.
When I got to the Badwater 135, I felt like I was as prepared as I could be. And I kept trying to keep my head into it. In fact, my crew would probably tell you that I was super duper quiet the whole time before the race. Like I was just kind of like in a zone kind of a thing. On the way home, I was
Yep.
like chatty, and they're probably wishing I was back in my zone. But I do remember kind of thinking it through. And one of the things Tony said when we were loading the van, so they were loading the van and then they got me to come out. And he said, let's go do what we came here to do. And again, goosebumps. That was so powerful at that moment.
Hmm.
In fact, I keep that in my head sometimes. Like when I'm about to do something and I think my confidence is waning, I hear him say that, let's go do what we came here to do. Because it puts it all in perspective. So
Yeah.
then
I love it. I'm literally writing that down
I
because
thought
that
that's why I was waiting. No, that's not
it's
that.
so good. It's like I think, it's when we often talk about like mantras or phrases or just single words that you can sort of repeat to yourself if you're in a bad way or you're having a terrible time and you just need to pull yourself through. I think if you can frame it, we also talk about dissociation and kind of stepping outside of yourself. And if you can frame it in a way, it's like, hey, this is the job that you have to do. And it can be as big as I have to finish this race, or it can be as small as I just need to make it to that next tree or the next aid station. I just need to eat the rest of this. I need to drink the rest of my bottle. It's like, let's go do what we came here to do. It's just like, what is that thing? And it can be a million different things under one umbrella, or it could be the big thing. But if you frame it that way, it becomes less about you and more about the task at hand. And my opinion is that's an easier pill to swallow. It's like just easier to focus on that stuff versus like, oh, I feel terrible, or is it going to get worse, or
Right.
any number of things that you might be thinking or feeling.
Right, right. Well, and I used to have little phrases up to 3 that I would have for each race. And a lot of times I would have at least one have a picture. Like I remember the picture for the first race of the Grand Slam was 2 girls, little girls that were like, looked like they were swimming, and one is holding the other one's chin up. And it's like, chin up, you got that? You got this? And to me, in my mind, that was my daughter being there with me because she was my number one fan. But by then, she's at college. She's doing her thing. She can't come to all my crazy races, right? And she was
Right.
like one of my crew members at my first 100 too. So that she wasn't able to be there. So, kind of like you said, in your mind, you have something, whether it's got a picture associated to it or a saying. But after Tony said that, and I don't even think he knew how powerful that would be for the rest of my life. I think he was just like, hey, let's go do what we came here to do. I mean, it was kind of inspirational, but like, let's go at the same time,
Yeah.
So, and then it was 100 degrees when we started. There had been a storm that started kicking up. I was in the 9:30 p.m. start wave. So it started before we start, but it's windy. And luckily, again, I'm from Kansas, so I practiced in Kansas wind, but they were having 40-mile-an-hour gusts. So we're running and we're coming out of the Badwater Basin. So the first 17 miles, it's rolling and uphill, but it's rolling enough that you really can't see everybody else who's around you. I remember there was one place where I hadn't been going over to the van because I wanted them to come to me to not waste energy. And I went over to the van and I said to Tony, sorry, my language, do I suck at this? Like, what is going on? Where is everybody? Am I in last place? What is going on? He's like, no, you're fine. You just can't see everybody. I mean, the wind was just getting in my head because
Yeah.
the first 50 miles of the Badwater 135, that's like one of the hardest cutoffs. And that was the cutoff I was the most nervous about. So if this wind was going to cost me a minute a mile, it was going to make me nervous, especially being the 930 wave. Well, it wasn't costing
Hmm.
me a minute a mile, but so then another time I went over to the van and he could tell, again, it's still the wind. And he could tell that I was, like kind of thinking it through. And he's like, just get out there, just go, just do this. And that was the only
Yep.
two times where he had to kind of get me out of my head. But other than
Yep.
that, there was another time when I asked him, like, okay, what's this next part like? Well, it was Father Crowley. And so that's quite a climb. And he's like, oh, it's gently rolling like Heartland. No, it's not gently rolling like Heartland. So that's our joke now, too. Like, so your crew has to kind of like keep your wits about you and kind of feed you what they know your brain can take at the time. So I think
Yep.
crew is so important.
Yeah, for sure. And I think having crew that have knowledge of you, and bonus if they have knowledge of the race, is also really key because they're, like you said, they're going to need to kind of read the room and figure out how you're doing, what information you need to know, and what information you don't need to know. And they need to make sure you're eating and drinking and doing whatever the protocol is in terms of speed or safety. And so it's really key to have people in your corner that you can quite literally, I say this all the time, like hand yourself over to, so
Right.
that all you really have to do is run, and that should be your job, is just to do the running and not to do all of the big complex thinking about logistics and stuff like that, because that's just going to divert your attention and your energy.
Right. Well, and like you said about that too, being the runner, you know you. And again, I'm a CPA, so I love an Excel spreadsheet, right? So what I usually do is I have an Excel spreadsheet that I make, and I have every mile on there. And they're not going to see me every mile, right? But I try to
Right.
make little notes. So I have like columns for the crew, like where the restrooms are for them and me, and then where, meeting spots are. But then I also try to have a plan for them, like if I want a BCAA or if there's something that I know I want. Or if there's a nutrition or something that I know I want at a certain place, I put that on there. Or if there's something I want every 3 hours or every 2 hours, I make them watch that instead of me. But I make an
Hmm.
Excel spreadsheet and I print it out and I put it in like those little, like a 3 ring binder, how you have those little plastic sheets you can put it
Yep.
in. I put it in that so that they can write on that because it could get wet. Come on, we've all been there. And so then they can start
Absolutely.
taking notes, like, or if I take an ibuprofen or if I take a Tylenol, they can write when I took it, what time it was, what mile it was. So we can start to keep track of things. And so if they see a trend going down or they see a trend going up, they know what to keep doing or they know what to stop doing. So I think
Hmm.
that's been one of the most helpful things that we've added. One of my crews decided though that I forget what foods that I pack. And so sometimes I know I want something, but I forget what I might want. Because one time at the end of a race, I was like, I forgot we had oranges. And so they were like, hey, what we need to do is make like a little board, like a little menu, so that when you show up, you can be like, oh yeah, oranges.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different, it's so cool because there's so many different strategies that people have deployed with their runners. And you pick up little tips and tricks like this over the years, and you, like we
Right.
were talking about, you learn your runner and what their tendencies are, what their preferences are. And so, yeah, if you, rather than repeating every time, okay, you can have broth, you can have noodles, you can have, and it's like, just do like a picture menu and just point, and then we'll just get whatever you need. I love that.
Before I see my crew, I always try to think in my head, what do I want to tell them that I want? But I sometimes forget my options. So, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, and another thing,
Yep.
I guess, a lot of people talk about their feet because that's one of the most important things. And I know there's lots of schools of thought out there, but there's only one race, and that was the 40 miler that I've ever changed my shoes. And the only reason I
Mm.
changed my shoes is because it was raining and there was water running off of the field. So it was muddy, gunky, yucky water that made your shoes feel like they weighed 2 more pounds than they should have. So the next time I saw my crew, I changed my shoes. But other than that, I have never changed my shoes during a race. And there's a lot of people who'll tell you that's a no-no, that you should be redoing your feet. And I'm going to tell you, that's what's worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where people they get locked into a way of thinking sometimes, and they forget that, like we were just talking about, there's lots of different ways
Hmm.
to accomplish your goal of finishing. And not everybody's feet are terrible or need this or that. And not everybody's stomach does this or that and
Right.
chafing and all that jazz. So again, it's more about hearing people's stories and saying,
Mhm.
okay, well, that worked for them. Great for them. I
Mhm.
know that for me, I need to do this, that, or the other. And so I don't want people, not that they would, but to hear this and be like, oh, well, Peggy never changes her shoes, so I should never change my shoes. Like, well,
Right.
maybe you try, but
Right.
if you really need to, up here in the Northeast, we change our shoes a lot because of dirt and mud and
Right.
water. And, there are certain circumstances where it is beneficial to swap them out. And then there's other circumstances where it's like those conditions are going to continue. So there's zero point in changing my
See,
shoes because in five
right.
minutes, they're going to look exactly like they do right now.
Right. Well, and I guess I use the rule of thumb: if it's not broke, don't fix it.
True.
If it's not bothering you,
True.
why are you going to do something about it? So I might wear the same
Yep.
shirt the whole race. It's not bothering me. The only one really good piece of advice that I got, where you fix it even if it doesn't feel broken yet, was someone told me one time, especially during climates where it's hot during the day, but then it gets cold at night. They were like, don't ever let the sun go down and have sweaty clothes on.
Yep.
And so I would always look at where my crew was going to be, where the sun was going to go down, so that we would change my clothes before the sun went down. And I've seen people make the mistake of not getting sweaty clothes off and be literally shaking, because they're so
Yep.
cold. Here's
Yep.
another trick that I learned that I would share then, given the climate and stuff that you're in. So I learned the layering thing, but I also learned that I look so weird and I don't care. A lot of times when it's cold, I run with a raincoat on, whether it's raining or not. And the reason is because it's sealing in your heat. But if you're in a season where there's dew and there's going to be dew in the morning when it's cold, you're not going to be wet when you're at the dew point. And I kind of happened on that by mistake one time, and I always
Mm.
do it now. And people will be like, a raincoat? What do you need your raincoat for? It's not going to rain. Oh, you'll see.
Yeah. 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 There's all sorts of, like we said, all sorts of little tips and tricks like that. And you learn the ones that you like and you gravitate to and you want to repeat. And then others that you're like, man, I don't know if that necessarily fits for me. And then
Right,
that's what you end up, building your knowledge base around and your race plan around. And like you said, as you go to different environments, the way you guys race down south and the gear and stuff that you have is definitely different from what I would have in my drop bag and
right,
carrying on me, in terms of my gear up here. What I used out in Tahoe and Moab, they're kind of the same, but still, very climate and
oh
location
yeah,
specific. So it's kind of fun in that way. You get to try to morph and adapt to the conditions you're going to be in.
right. When I like heat, I love running in heat. I figured that out once I got used to it. But you're right, because what you wear in Death Valley is way different than what you wear in Florida. If you tried to stay cool in Florida like you tried to stay cool in Death Valley, you would just be a sloshy mess. So you're right. Like, it isn't the temperature, it's the temperature and what else.
Right. Right. Yeah, for sure. And I'm someone who does not enjoy the heat. And it's just, I think, again, where you grow up, what you're used to, what you gravitate to, what you train in 24/7. So yeah, give me like a overcast 40-degree day and I'm super happy. Put me in a super sunny, exposed 75-degree day. And I'm like, "Ah, how do I get out of the sun?"
Wasn't like that. I wasn't like that until I trained for Salton Sea in 2019. And when I was training for Salton Sea in 2019, I actually read everything that people did to heat train for Badwater 135. And so that's when I started doing the sauna work and everything like that. And it's like, once you reset your body for that and you
Right.
stay set for that, then now I'm just a real Florida person, where when it's, 60 degrees, we have a heavy coat on.
Yeah. Which gets me every time. When I lived in Arizona for about a year, we moved there in the heat of the summer, which was a terrible idea. I don't recommend it. But then when it got to wintertime, I was the one out there in short sleeve shirt and shorts, and everyone's got their Uggs and their puffer coats on and their, hats. And I'm like, guys, this is gorgeous weather. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, see, when I came out of the hospital from the long haul 135, it was probably about 6 weeks before I could stay by myself, because I've got this 90-pound dog, and I could barely walk from my room to the kitchen, and I knew I couldn't walk him and deal with that. So different people came and stayed with me, and my sister from Kansas came to stay with me, and it was like 60 degrees one day, and she went out to go walk him in a t-shirt, and I was like, don't you want a coat? She's like, no, it's really beautiful outside. Because
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
February 60s, like, this is warm. So it is whatever you become acclimated to.
Well, Peggy, do you have any advice for someone who's listening to this and thinking like they haven't quite gotten into ultras yet, but they're considering it? They're kind of on the fence. Do you have any advice that you would tell someone that was sort of thinking about doing it?
Well, I think for me, what I noticed when I went from running marathons to running 50 was it's a whole different pace. At least it was for me. I didn't keep my marathon pace for 50 miles. So
Right.
I think it's just learning to take it 1 mile at a time, one section at a time, however your mind breaks it down, and allowing your body to do what it needs to do during that time. So I think that's how I made it finally to the 100 mark, just allowing my body to do what it needed to do at that time instead of thinking we got to be running as fast as we can, which is what people
Yeah.
still do when they're in a marathon. So I think that's the biggest difference. And I think also, I think one of the reasons I stuck with ultras over marathons is it's a completely different community. It's when you're at a race, everybody's there for everyone else. If you and I are running and you're struggling and I have something that you need, I'm going to give it to you, or vice versa, or if,
Hmm.
whatever. In a marathon, you don't really see that all the time. I
Yeah.
ended up running another marathon. My daughter and her husband were living in London, and they said, we want to run a marathon with you. So we went to Athens because I wanted to run the Athens marathon, and I really didn't want to run any other marathon. So we went over there, and I forgot that people are throwing water bottles, and you're like, what is going on? Like, you don't have that in an ultra. You never get hit with someone's water bottle because they threw it. Like, it doesn't happen.
No. And if it does, it's because that person has tripped and they like, it's a yard sale. All their gear went everywhere. And most likely you're going to go over and make sure that they're okay.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and I think another thing is, here we are laughing, right? So I think that's another thing about ultras is we don't take ourselves quite as seriously. And I
Yeah.
know I was kind of bummed up about falling and, like being all messed up and everything. Well, another thing about me is I had to do some bone density therapy. So I have a doctor for that, So I had to do like a round of stuff for a year, and now I do stuff every 6 months. So when I saw him, I said, hey, you guys need to put me on a commercial because this is what I did. And as old as I am, and I didn't break anything, like this should be a commercial, and we're laughing, but there's some seriousness there too. But I'm thinking,
Yeah.
if a shoes company isn't going to sponsor me, maybe a bone density company will. But I think it's like you got to find ways to kind of laugh through, even when your brain is kind of hurting because it's hard to be injured. And you've just got to find ways to keep saying, I can do other things. Like when I couldn't run after the long haul, I bought a rowing machine because I knew it was going to be a while before my calf could recover. So I think I would just tell people stay flexible, stay nimble about your workouts. Don't get too wound up with, what you can and can't do. Just keep doing, just keep being, just stay
Hmm.
healthy. And, I think it also starts to be, after a while, more of a mental thing for us. Like we start doing it for physical, but then it becomes a mental. So you've got to keep active mentally. And I think I'm also kind of turning the corner to where I want to keep running long term. And I'm at a different age than you. And so I've got a lot of friends who can't run and can't run ultras anymore. And so I'm trying
Yep.
to listen to my body enough to know when to stop pushing it so hard. But I still want to know how far I can go. I still want to get that 200 miler. I still want to see, how far I can go. And I will. But I also know that I can't be in that mode 24/7, 365.
Right.
And I think that was another thing that I would share with somebody when I was really competitive about it and wanting to win and things like that. One of my friends was married to a Major League Baseball player. And she said to me, she said, even professional athletes allow their bodies to have preseason, season, and postseason. And I don't see you letting your body have anything but season. And she was right. And that's probably why I had all the little nagging injuries. And so I had to kind of rethink it for myself. Like, when do I let things plateau a little bit? Even if it's a month or two and I feel like I'm going crazy because I'm not getting super long runs in the end, I'm doing something better for my body if I want to keep doing this when I'm 70, 80, if I want to stay nimble, if I want to, I have friends that can't even get up off the floor. It's like, I can get off the floor. Like, I want to have a healthy body long term, so I don't want to do something too ridiculous, but yet I'm going to find out how far I can go.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I'm definitely gonna clip that part when you talked about preseason, in season, and postseason because I'm someone who actually, and I've talked about this before. I actually like getting a little deconditioned because A, it's a nice break, and B, I think it helps me to appreciate more my fitness just in general. And I like the process of building back up again. I find it excessively difficult to maintain a certain level of fitness year round. And
Sure.
I also don't believe fundamentally that that's good for us for all the reasons that you just said.
Hmm.
And I do think that there are a lot of people who could benefit from spending a little more time in the preseason, postseason, and completely off season where you're just, maybe you're doing other things, not running related, and giving your body opportunities to move and be used in a different way that has nothing to do with running. And people sometimes forget that that is definitely beneficial to your running, right? We can't just keep hammering away at the same movement patterns and the same
Right.
strength training exercises and expect different or better outcomes without changing the stimulus in some way, shape, or form. So
Right.
yeah, people are always saying to me, like, you really like getting deconditioned? I'm like, yeah, it's like it's one of my favorite things to do because I appreciate it more. You see results often much quicker when you get deconditioned because then you're like, oh yeah, I remember how to like work up to this speed, or it's great
Right.
to be able to appreciate those things.
Right. Right. And some of my friends that hadn't seen me for a while saw me before a race one time and they're like, "Are you feeling okay? You look like you've lost weight." And I was like, "No, this is just my race ready body. Aren't you?" So I'm like you where, my body doesn't stay the exact same. And I think that's probably healthier too because it lets it have its peaks and valleys and I don't have the inflammation issues that I was starting to have. And I think it's just better all the way around. Would I rather walk around body 24/7, 365? Yes, but it's just not it's not healthy long term for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think it's, again, that's something that I think I wish more people kind of understood is sort of the ebb and flow and the balance of how this is quote unquote supposed to
Yeah.
work. I think we get a lot of mixed messages. We get a lot of, direction as to like, oh, you should be race ready at the drop of a hat. So if your friend says, hey, do you want to do this race with me next weekend? You're ready to go. And I'm a big proponent of planning and like having a training timeline and picking a race and aiming for that race. And if something happens, fine, we can recalibrate. Like you said, when you couldn't do that race and then you switched gears and did something else. But like, let's not just try to maintain 100-miler fitness year round in the hopes that we find a race that we can then slot ourselves into.
Well, and I know people that race a lot more than me. I know people that have raced
Right.
almost every weekend and done 100 milers almost every weekend.
I
And maybe their body's built different, or maybe they're not eating as much candy as I am, or something. I don't know what's going on, but
It's
something's
all the
happening.
Cadbury mini eggs right now.
How did you know? Are you following me? Is there a
No,
rapper?
because it's Easter. No, but that's my drug of choice right now, and I've been really good. I haven't had any for like the last couple of weeks, but I have definitely eaten my fair share of entire, industrial sized bags of
Same
Cadbury
here.
mini eggs.
Same here. And I was shocked they don't have the white eggs anymore. I thought I was eating enough of those every year. They would have kept those on the shelves.
I know, right?
I did. I
Clearly
tried.
not. Clearly, we need to up our consumption.
Because I was like, you can either have egg whites or white eggs. I thought it was
Right.
similar.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the
Oh,
other part too, is like, your body's gonna look different. You're gonna perform different. I think especially as women, we are sort of fed the narrative that our bodies should not change. They should always look a certain way, and they should stay that way regardless of what you do with them, how you age,
mhm.
what happens. It's like, this little box and whatnot. And I think that's one of the greatest parts about the ultra community is that you will show up to a race and you will see people of not only all different body sizes, but as to your point, different ages and
Right.
different abilities. Like someone always has to be first and someone always has to be last. And in ultras, people are celebrated for being last, and it's great and it's amazing. And I think that's what makes the community so great. It's like to your earlier point, we're all just here to have a good time and do our race, but we're also community minded. We will hand you something if you need it. We will pick you up off the ground if you yard sail and
Right.
fall. And it's more of that. And I had the same kind of experience in the marathon world. I only did a handful. I think I maybe did 3 of them before I was like, I think I need to switch gears and do something different. And part of the reason why I switched was like, I'm just another number in this crowd. Like, it's not really, I don't really enjoy the experience of this whole
Right.
thing.
And you're so
Where,
crowded.
as compared to ultras, I love it.
Right. Well, and I think another thing that I would tell people would be to have a hierarchy of goals. So I always have a hierarchy of goals at every race. So first and foremost is finish the race and get the buckle. So if you at least do that, you've hit your main goal. That's why you
Yep.
showed up. You wanted that buckle. Then get the buckle without injuries. Like so
Yep.
it's you make it be kind of simple, and then you tell a few friends if it's a race that you want to place in, or if it's a race that you think you want to win, or like you can have these great goals, but start it so that even if you just cross the finish line, you won, you hit a
Mm-hmm.
goal. And I think so many people have their goals flipped the other way around, where their goal is to win the race or whatever. So if they're saying that they're not going to do that, they just DNF. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't do that. My first goal is to get the buckle.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So
I
I
would even
think
go
that
one step further. And I always coach my athletes to have, to your point, a hierarchy of goals, and also like minimum viable product, right? Minimum viable work product. What is that? Is it, finish 1 second underneath the time cutoff, right? That goes to your point of like finishing the race and getting the buckle. But in lots of people's minds, it's like, well, if I don't finish with X number of minutes ahead of the cutoff, it's not valid. It's like you beat the time cutoff, right? And at the very least, if you miss the time cutoff, can you get yourself across the finish line, save for races where they're going to pull you off the course because of logistics or whatever?
right,
Like, can you at least, close the loop and finish, right? I mean, there's varying levels of goals, and I think nobody but you gets to decide what those goals are. And you should, like you said, make a hierarchy, make a list, so that if the first one gets knocked off for some reason, that you, to your point, you don't abandon it, you go to the next one. And if that something happens to that, you go to the next. And you just have this list and you just work the list, work the problem.
Well, and another thing that I would like to say is, I had the coach once, and I think a major thing is you've got to not be afraid to tell your coach what you're really doing. Because if
Yes.
you don't tell your coach what you're really doing, how can they help you fix it? Because I know Dawn was telling me to do some things, and I wasn't hiding it. I mean, I was like telling her what I was doing, because in my mind, this is what I needed to do. And so finally, I said in one thing with it, she got a little terse with me, and she was like, "Did I get terse with you?" And I said, "You needed to." And she was just like, "Peggy, you need to eat what I'm telling you to eat. You need to take the hydration I'm telling you to take." And luckily it happened early enough that we were able to make me do what she told me to do. And like I said, to her credit, it paid off at the 135, because I was never sick. There were people throwing up.
Mm.
There were people getting dehydrated. There were people who couldn't eat. I didn't have any of that. And it was because luckily during my training, she knew what I needed to do. I was honest with her about what I really wasn't doing. So she knew where I really was. So she knew what she
Yep.
needed to do to turn it around. So
I
tell
think
your
that's one
athletes,
thing.
be honest.
Yeah, we as coaches are only as good as the information that you give us. And
Uh-huh.
I'm always trying to tell people that, like, I'm not going to be mad at you. Just tell me what's going on. Because if I'm asking you to do something and it's not working for you, and you're trying it and it's not working for you, we need to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. Like, figure out why it's not working, or scheduling, or whatever it might be. But don't lie to me. Like, I can only be helpful if I understand the full scope, the full
Right,
picture. And if you're only telling me this much,
right.
there's only so much I can do.
Right. And I think another thing that I would say would be get your coach sooner than later, because that was one thing that dawned on me early. Dawned, her name was Dawn. That's weird. It dawned on me what I needed Dawn. But I mean, I think that was one of the things that I realized early on. It's like the saying, if you want to do something you've never done before, you've got to do things you've never done before. It's a different saying,
Yep.
but you know the gist of it. So I knew
Yeah.
that I couldn't just keep relying on me. I couldn't just keep relying on what I could do research or the people that I could talk to. I needed to go find someone who professionally I knew could do it. And I also chose her because we were about the same age. And so, like, I was in my 50s. And so, someone who's in their 50s, your body is going to act different in the heat than maybe somebody in their 20s, kind of a thing.
Yep.
So, I kind of looked at all of the factors. And so, that was another thing that I had to take into account was the sooner I brought her on, the better. I've
Hmm.
recommended her to some other people since, and I've recommended her, like, with plenty of time for them to get her on board, but then they wait till the last 5 weeks before the race. That's not really going to do anything. You're in you're either in shape to do the race by then or not. You're just a
Yep.
couple of long runs away from your taper, so it's not really going to help.
Yep. Yeah, I would second that 100%. It's as a coach myself, again, if people bring me in at the 23rd hour, there's only so much that I can do. To your point, like the work has been done at this point. I'm not a miracle worker. I will help you as much as I possibly can, but again, I'm only as good as the amount of lead time and the amount of information that you give to me. I think people often view coaches like problem solvers, which we are, but if you've dug yourself into such a deep hole,
Right.
with with very little time for me to help you dig yourself out of the hole, there's only so much that we can do.
Right. For sure. Especially
Yeah.
in an ultra. I mean, if you were hired for a 5K 5 weeks out, that's way different than hired for 100 mile.
100%. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Right. When we start to Yeah. When we start to increase the distance, the lead time, I'm big on lead time, giving yourself ample time to train for things. My big pet peeve is people trying to cram 50K training into, 12 or 16 weeks. And I just don't, I personally, especially for first timers, I don't think that's enough. And then, because then work and vacation and kids get sick and it just eats away at your available time. So I'm big on timelines in that sense. And so the best way to set yourself up for success is to pick that race, have a nice long on ramp, so to speak, and be able to make a lot of mistakes and learn a lot of lessons and
Right.
then show up well trained and not, with your hair on fire because you've just, like gone so crazy in the last 6 weeks trying to cram all this training in and your body just
Right.
cannot handle that.
Well, and to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest, this sounds a little arrogant. So it was 2019, and it was the Monday when the Badwater 135 was starting. And I walked in, and I was starting with a new personal trainer. And I said to him, I said, I'm 1 year out from possibly running the biggest race of my life. I want to be total body fit because I want to apply for this race and I want to get in. So that was in 2019. And so then again, 2020 didn't happen. So I really had 2 years of that total body training with him. And it really paid off because, like you said, you can't just run and get there, it's your total body. And so I think, that saying to run an ultra, you have to be arrogant. No, arrogant enough to think that you can do it and stupid enough to try, right? So
Yes.
do that. Be arrogant enough to think you're going to get into your dream race because then you
Yep.
start putting the plan into place that if and when you get in, you show up and you're ready. So,
Hmm.
if someone has the aspiration, then they need to hire somebody like you a year out, 2 years out. I mean, whatever
Yep.
they're doing, because especially in some of these races where you have to have a really good resume, get somebody to help you
Yep.
get that resume built. Because if you're going to go somewhere you've never gone before, you need people to help you get there. And that's,
I love
the
that you
race
said that.
community. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just started this audiobook, maybe you've heard of it, called Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. Have you read this
Oh,
one?
yeah. I've heard of it.
Yeah,
Is it
it's
good?
so great and you just illustrated the point 100%. To your point is like if you want to do this thing, you don't necessarily have to know how to do it. You need to look around you and see the people, the who's that can help you figure it out. I know I talk a lot about how I sort of white knuckled it the first time I ran a 50K. I didn't have anyone in my social circle. I didn't know anyone that could help me. And so I sort of did it all by myself. But then as I went forward, I definitely started to, ask more people for help and reach out to the ultra community. And it just got so much easier. It's like you didn't have to become an expert in this, that, and the other. You could glean information and get help from personal trainers and coaches and nutrition coaches and dietitians and, you're the shoe guy at your, running store. It's like you can get the information that you need. You don't have to learn it all the hard way. You
Right.
don't have to suffer. You can look around you and recruit people to help you. And there's so many people out there that are willing and able and ready and would be like really excited to help you accomplish
Right.
whatever big scary goal you have.
And again, that's what I love about our community. In fact, that reminded me. So after I had set the course record at the Heartland 50, the race director reached out to me and said, let's go to lunch. And so we went to lunch, and guess who became my crew member at three of my races for the old Grand Slam? It was him. And it's like,
Yeah.
because he wanted to see me succeed. And that's just how we are. Like I told you, I mean, I spent a lot of time just crewing and pacing other people. And I used to tease people, that's actually more fun because you don't have to pay and you get all this free food and you get to be bossy. You get to run. It's so fun.
Yep. I love crewing and pacing. It is it is my happy place. It is just so much fun. I live for it. Last year I crewed a couple friends who were running the Southern States 200, and we had a whole crew people because we had three people running the race. So we had three runners, we had three crew members, and it was a full on ordeal because that's a point to point race that goes 200 miles. That is not a circle, or out and back. So logistically, that was crazy. And then for the most part, they stayed together right up until now I'm going to blank on what mile it was. And they're going to hear this and they're going to be like, Megan, why don't you know what mile we broke up at? But they had a pact to stay together for as long as possible, which was great for us logistically. And then towards the end, within like the last 30 miles, they sort of broke apart, which then became a little challenging, but that's just so fun for me. It is, I just think it is really, especially if you have experience running those types of races, that just makes you that much more valuable and
Right.
knowledgeable as a crew person and as a pacer as well, for
Right.
sure. And that's what I tell people too. If you want to get into ultras, volunteer at a race, crew somebody, pace somebody, like, dip your toe into the water because it's going to give you a real good picture, a real good understanding of what's involved in this whole ultra running thing.
Well, in my next gig is I'm going to help Bethany, my Ultra Cup sister. She's going to run the Keys 100. So I'm so excited to get to be down there to crew and pace her. I mean, it's just like family time almost. I mean, we're just going to enjoy it. And like you said, you just get to be a part of it and you're helping someone else meet a goal. So
Yep.
it's really rewarding. In fact, Carrie, the person who suggested me for this, we met because we were I was not going to pace because it was very hard trail, but I was going to crew and she was going to crew and pace another runner out in Colorado. So that's how we met. And it's so funny because you meet someone and we've only met that once, but we're just so close.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain to people what the ultra family and the ultra community feels like.
Yep. Yeah, I have lots of like really good friends that I either only see at races or met at races, and then we've just continued to be friends, through email or social media or whatever.
Right.
And the best part about that is that I know that if I was like, "Hey, I'm doing this, are you in?" They'd be like, "Yes," and they would show up prepared and they would understand the task at hand, like they would understand the assignment, and I wouldn't have to bring them up to speed. You know what I mean? It's just like this. They would do whatever was asked of them while we were there. It's one of the best. I also think, as a side note, when you're an adult, sometimes it's harder to make friends, and this is like a crash course in how to make friends. And you just you don't have to go through a lot of the same methodologies that you had to go through to make friends in your teens and 20s and maybe even 30s. It's just like communal bonding over a shared love of a sport, which is great.
Right. Well, and most ultra runners have about the same personality.
Yes.
We're kind of goofy sometimes, but we know how to dig deep, and you find some of the most interesting people because, again, like you said, it's all ages, it's all body shapes, but it's also all walks of life. It's so amazing to find out what some people do, but yet at the core, we're the same person. I think that's
Yep.
why we have so many ultra friends and why it's such an instant bond.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
fun.
For sure. I love it. Yeah. I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Me either. Me either. I hope I'm still running ultras when I'm so old that my daughter's changing the tennis balls on my walker during the ultra. That's what my joke for her. So she better stay in shape so she can get down to that tennis ball and change it for me.
I
She's
know,
our
right?
ongoing joke, but luckily she's physically fit, and they were running marathons, but they've never gone into the ultra world. But I mean, they're at a different stage in their life. They're busy. I was 42 when I
Yeah.
ran my first ultra. So you just get in different stages of your life, and just whether you have
Yep.
time to get all of that workout in, and you've got a treadmill in your basement, that's what you need sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Peggy, thank you so much for coming to hang out and chat. And maybe when you finish your 200 miler, you have to come back and tell us about that experience because 200 milers are a whole other a whole other ball of wax, which I'm sure but it's definitely an experience, and if you do it, then we'd love to hear about it.
Well, it's you tell three people, right? And then you've got to go do it. And now I've told more than three, so I've got to now. So it's got to happen. It will.
It'll happen. It'll happen. I know it'll happen because you've already put it, like you said, you've put it out into the universe. So it'll, if it's not this year, next, it'll definitely happen for
It
sure.
will. It will. Well, let me say it's been such an honor to be invited to be on your podcast, but it's been such a joy too. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.